Hey, how's it going, everybody? My name is Paul, and I'm relatively new to Orthodoxy, but I've been inspired. And so my inspiration came in the form of being at church a little while ago and really just having I guess, a flash or something of an idea for an Orthodox church. Um, I've been kind of looking at different designs, different kind of symbolism associated with church architecture and whatnot. And this idea I had really kind of struck me. And so it's been something I've been working on for the past month or so now. And I just wanted to share it with everybody, kind of maybe get some feedback, some critiques on what works, what doesn't. Just get some ideas and reactions to some of the things I've been thinking about. So without further ado, I'll just start with a basic floor plan and see what people think, and if it's something that's kind of sparks anyone else's imagination in addition to mine. So I think the idea in a nutshell is to have a space that really incorporates a lot of the different aspects of life, whether it be the spiritual, the physical, the community aspects. I think the Orthodox Church is amazing at this, and something that's actually drawn me to it. And just the tradition and the faith is the seeming, I don't know, the way just everything is always drawn together to kind of find the fullness in things while also maintaining balance and not overdoing it in any, or hopefully not overdoing it in any one area. And so it kind of leads to a very holistic way of looking at things, I think. And so my goal is to just kind of continue that through line basically, and to keep those ideas in mind when thinking of designs or just different patterns, or even down to the materials that things are built with. I think there's space in each of those realms to really be intentional and to put our best foot forward. So we'll start with the sanctuary area, and you'll have to forgive me. I don't know exactly the technical terms for everything. I've heard temple, I guess. So with the temple, sanctuary area, worship area, kind of the idea was to do. I mean, obviously, I want to keep the the pivotal structures, with the orientations correct, to the east, the altar facing to the east, but then also having, so keeping that the same. Where it starts to deviate a little bit, I guess, or maybe become a little bit more unorthodox, even according to modern building standards, is really had the idea of kind of combining, in Revelation specifically, you have the city descending and the garden kind of mixed with the city. And so for me, if the temple area is kind of symbolizing, future heaven, or, this worshipful area, to me, combining nature and kind of building or technology is a really fascinating idea. So the idea that I had was kind of an arboretum area. You could have, kind of plants and different trees, maybe even in the sanctuary. I think that would just be a really cool thing to make the space. I think it would really elevate the space. And you'd have to find the balance to where it's not distracting. It's not taking up the space of anything, of any rituals that need to take place or anything like that. But, just enough to kind of bring back nature into our spaces. I think there's, obviously people talk about being in nature as being healing and, kind of communing with God there and stuff. So to me, seeing the combination of, the city and the garden, and trying to bring all things together under Christ, and to kind of restoring Eden in some sense. It really makes sense to me, just in my mind, symbolically, to bring everything together and to really make a space that both puts people at peace and elevates them and causes their hearts to worship. So I think that could be something that would do it. The other things, I think working with design to make things acoustically sound is a really cool idea. Um, and this kind of will get into the building materials a little bit as well. But there's different building materials you can use to make really cool shapes in your walls, in your architecture. And so I think having kind of some sort of uh, basically I don't know, amphitheater shape, I guess, for your choir would be a really cool way of doing it. I think you could work with that to make the acoustics just really sing on their own, pun intended, in the space. And that's something it's gone back throughout history of, doing different things to increase that. But I think that can be a pivotal part of the experience and bringing everyone together in worship through that. So the other strange idea I had would be in the center under the altar. So you can see kind of the main, I guess, aisle leading up to the altar. It's blue. I had this idea of kind of having a stream flow from underneath the altar and kind of come out into through the where the aisle would be recessed, and over it you'd have kind of glass that you could walk on. And so hopefully it wouldn't be to be showy or to be flashy, but I do think the symbolism is there and would kind of make for an awe-inspiring experience. And so kind of some of the images that come to my mind is Peter walking on the water out to Jesus, or in Revelation again when the river of life comes out from the throne. There's these different ideas there that I think are very poignant, and if it's something that could cause people to reflect or kind of experience wonder, I think those things often lead back to God. So that was my idea there. Moving a little bit to the left, obviously I think the sanctuary and the temple area should be on an elevated part of the plot. And so because of that, you would, to go up to it, this is, I think you would want kind of, I was thinking of like a hallway, basically, where you'd have like a staircase. I think you could also do some, maybe like a small incline as well, just to make sure it's accessible to everybody. You don't want to keep anyone from worshiping. But, having this staircase or this ascent in a hallway, and, I think tying it in, you could tie it to the ladder of divine ascent, kind of being elevated to worship or coming back down to earth, to participate in fellowship in the rest of the world. And so as you're going up the hall, I think you could do some really cool stuff with murals, just probably pretty striking stuff with murals and icons and different imagery there. So, and that would go down into the fellowship hall, which would be pretty standard. I'm still trying to look for ways to tie that in symbolically, or like cool things to do with that. So if anybody has any ideas, that's one area I'm definitely looking for more inspiration in. And then as far as the center area, I think having some sort of gardens area where you could just meditate on the message, the worship, whatever you needed to before or after the service. Just a place to really take a breath and reflect. Those places are hard to come by. As someone who likes to go out to parks and stuff, it's hard to find a really good space that's kind of curated in a nice way. That's also kind of, in this case, serves a higher purpose. I think if it's in the area of the temple and the fellowship hall, I think it's going to be an elevated space where people can take the time to reflect or talk with others, or kind of use it in a very wholesome way. So and I think you could have maybe an outdoor patio for meals or whatnot as well, and all that. I guess touching on the fellowship hall again, I think you'd have all the standard stuff: kitchen, maybe a little bookstore, library, restrooms, tables, all that kind of stuff. The one other, I guess there's a few other ideas, but the cemetery is, I had this idea to put it at the front. I don't know exactly where they would traditionally go, but to me, it kind of resonated for a few different ways because it seems like in the Orthodox tradition, there's definitely, the idea of remembering, the idea of kind of carrying tradition, and the saints continue to be with us, pray for us. So my idea was kind of to put that front and center, kind of keep it fenced off and orderly, so people aren't going through it to get to the fellowship hall or whatnot. Maybe have a gate through the pass through it and stuff. But yeah, just I think we're very far removed from death in this current culture, and so I think anytime you can kind of bring that aspect back into at least some amount of focus, I think it's a good thing to kind of make sure we're keeping our attention on the whole picture and not just selective parts that we choose. So I think it'd be a great way to kind of remember the people, of the parish and whatnot as we enter and exit the place. Kind of some of the symbology I had been thinking of with that was the idea of you kind of pass, as you enter the church, you're passing from death to life. And so, cemetery to the sanctuary. And, you get the idea of almost like a resurrection or a baptism or something as you're entering. And so having it at the front for that reason seems kind of interesting. And then as well as, when you're leaving, it's like you're kind of, again, descending back into the world, and you're going back out into the world through death. And so you're kind of carrying the light of Christ that's going to restore the world and, bring life back to the world. So for that reason, it carries a lot of weight for me, I guess, to have it at the front and to kind of be cognizant of it as I enter the church or leave the church. So yeah, that was my thought there. The other thing would be having a path that kind of goes all the way around the church. I've only been part of a few processions, but each one I did, I loved, and it was just such a cool thing. So I think having a dedicated little path around the church could be really cool. And I don't know exactly how outdoor icons work or things like that, but having maybe some markers along the path that kind of tell a story or, kind of touch on, maybe a journey or something of a saint or some sort of spiritual concept, I think would be really cool opportunity for that to, bring people back to remembrance. And then one other thing that's not fully related to the church, but one of my other big interests is actually regenerative agriculture. And that's essentially just, going about farming practices that are good for the earth and produce an abundance of crops. So I think having that much space or land around you would really benefit from something like a community garden, just a way to grow high quality food for your community, your parish, whatever. Obviously, that's a big coordination task, and it requires more than just talking about it. It requires a lot of organization. Yeah, again, a lot of organization and people willing to put in the work. But I think it would be a kind of a cool opportunity or ministry that you could have associated, and you kind of get the whole, I guess, the symbolism of kind of moving from very ordered to, the fields on the outskirts. So I always like that symbolism. So yeah, I think that wraps up most of the floor plan for what I was thinking. And then we'll move on after this to building materials and kind of what you would make things out of. And yeah, that section might be a little dry. So if you need to skip, I don't blame you. All right, so the first material up is called cob. And it's actually a super old building material, mostly made of earth, as are many things I'm going to talk about. Like literally dirt in this case. It's a mixture of kind of clay, straw, and a little bit different earth. But these materials have actually just been around for such a long time, and they've really stood the test of time in many regions of the world. Today, they're not used for quite a few reasons, mostly just for efficiency's sake and cost reduction as far as planning and building. So Anytime you're building with these materials, it's going to be pretty custom to what you're doing. So there's no, standard 4x8 plywoods that you're kind of planning everything around or whatnot. And so for that reason, I think people tend to want to stay away from that, just big builders or whatnot. So things have definitely favored efficiency and just speed to just get as many houses down as possible. But I think when you're doing something custom, something meaningful, um, these kind of materials really lend themselves to these projects that are meant to stand the test of time and last many, 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 many lifetimes. So for me, I mean, on top of just being completely from the earth, they'll return back to the earth, in 500 or 1,000 years, essentially, especially if they're maintained. To me, that just, seems like a win-win in a lot of ways. So many structures have been made out of cob, from small little houses to large halls. You know, it's an amazing building material. But yeah, so basically you're building out of again, clay, a little bit of dirt, some straw, and you're building around a mesh structure. So you kind of frame with this, different kinds of meshes. And then from there, you're mixing all these ingredients together with some water, and you're basically just packing it on and smoothing it down. And you get really cool, you can get curves, you can get all kinds of shapes. Any shape you can put the mesh in, you can actually cob over and turn into a wall. So I think with that, it's, you get this kind of organic, in some sense, organic shape. I mean, you can go more traditional, but you can get really cool stuff and just really unlock your creativity and make things that are kind of meaningful to your space, whether it be, maybe little cutouts for icons or something, or candle holders or whatnot. So the potential is pretty much endless with that, without doing a lot of extra additive work. You get other really cool properties with it. It's very insulating. So being earth and kind of the thickness of the walls, you get a lot of natural insulation, a lot of natural soundproofing. So those are big things, while also actually still being pretty breathable, just because of some of the straw in there and the porous nature of the sand you kind of put in. So you get away from a lot of molds and stuff for that reason. But yeah, lets the building kind of breathe, so to speak. And then also, because it is mostly dirt, it basically becomes fireproof. If a fire ever comes through, it's essentially just turning it into a more of a brick, essentially, and baking it. So you're good there. It's pretty shock resistant, outside of maybe Yellowstone exploding and causing a super earthquake. They're pretty stable. Earth in general is pretty shock absorbent, but even building above it, it's still going to retain a lot of those properties. So it's also termite proof, which is great. I've seen a lot of buildings destroyed by termites, or you have to extremely treat the wood, which is pretty toxic. So I don't know, mixed bag there. Pick your poison, literally. And then the other thing is, it's also quite cheap to use as a building material, since the ingredients are just from the earth. Most things are pretty readily available, especially here in Idaho. We got a lot of straw. There's a lot of places with a lot of clay in the soil. So it's actually a pretty ideal spot to use these materials. Yeah, so one of the downsides, so yeah, the cost isn't super high, but one reason people won't use cob is because it actually takes quite a bit of labor to get it all together, whereas you can slap up framing and drywall walls pretty fast. Using cob, it's going to take a lot of hands, essentially. And so to me, that's one of the cool aspects, though. That's actually a kind of a pro, is, just thinking about a church, there's a lot of hands. And so with something like that, you're really kind of digging into the community aspect and kind of bringing people along. Because with just a few people supervising, it actually it's pretty low skill work to apply the cob and even mix it. So it's something that many people can do and make the process actually go relatively quickly. Um, and how cool is that to, like, have people build their own church, or at least, participate in building the walls and whatnot. So I think that's a really underrated, actually, value of it, that you can kind of bring people on board in the process and, kind of give them some stake in what they've, in the places they're going to participate in going forward, even once it's built. So, and then once you have the cob up, natural plasters are a great way to finish it. Kind of smooth everything over. You get really nice, just white, like brilliant white finishes with a lot of the natural plasters. You can paint them too if you need to. A lot of, with the Orthodox and tradition, you can really dive into that area as well, where a lot of old churches were finished with plaster. Icons were painted on them. It's actually a great way of preserving icons. And a lot of, I've seen a lot of paintings that have, you chip them out of the plaster hundreds or thousands of years later, and preserve them that way if you need to, or they're easier to clean up than just painting on canvas or drywall or whatever the thing is. So, yeah, I think having natural plasters is really cool. They also lend themselves really nicely to acoustics. Basically, with a lot of materials, it'll actually dampen the sound and kind of absorb sound. But with plasters, they kind of reflect it in a very pure way and even resonate it to some degree. And so for having, choir singing or, just kind of a natural sounding environment, plasters can be pretty good. So, yeah. And they definitely have a track record of working for many years, because, I mean, we've seen plasters for thousands of years being used to great success. So there's a track record there of using these things that are from the earth and good for the earth and good for the people in the space. They also increase basically structural strength as you kind of coat things in plasters. As they harden, it kind of creates a shell that will then increase the strength of the building. Also adds to the increased insulation factor as well, and soundproofing, as it reflects sounds from the outside. So if you got a highway nearby and you need to not hear it, between cob and plaster, you're probably pretty good. One of the last main materials I was going to talk about that's a little bit, I guess, more unknown, is the idea of earthen floors. So, I think it's hard for people to imagine some of these materials, so I'll try to maybe show some pictures or something. But essentially, the idea is that you're taking very, again, specific recipes of dirt, different kinds of dirt, and you're mixing them together and you're packing them down in layers and kind of sealing over each layer. And so as you do that, you kind of build up a really cool, rich looking floor that's kind of got this like veneer or lacquer over it. And so there's different natural ways to do this. And even when you're putting down the different layers, you can add dyes to the dirt or color it, or make different patterns and stuff with different mixtures, and make like really cool looking just patterns or different floor plans. But so it's something that is just as practical as anything else, while still being kind of unique. And I think really just again, tying together that kind of garden and city metaphor of combining the earth with useful thing, or with a functional place. So and then once you got the final lacquer down, you basically have a hardwood, not hardwood, but some sort of vinyl flooring, essentially, that you can walk on is just fine. And then every 3 to 5 years, you kind of have to reseal it. But I think it's worth it for kind of a stunning and very practical and even economical flooring system. So um, one of the cool things with Idaho is there's actually just so many abundant materials here locally. So I think with a lot of I mentioned a lot of the cob stuff is found here in Idaho. Um, Local timber is definitely in abundance as we all see the logging trucks going by. We got like cedar. There's not a ton of different hardwoods, but there's access to definitely some really good lumber for natural building or whatnot. So I know people have lots of lumber on their properties. There's access to different facilities or sawmills and stuff. So I think there's ways to get cool custom lumber for any project that requires it. Get a lot of river stone as well. So that's it for the building materials. I think the real idea that kind of inspires me through this project is bringing the community on board. Really just getting people involved from step one, with even in just the idea phase, kind of hearing people out, hearing thoughts, because every great idea has just had, kind of stems from a lot of influence and a lot of different kind of being open to different ideas and different opinions. So to me, that is a really important part of it. And just, if anybody ever wants to come talk to me, I would love to talk to you. This is one of my favorite subjects to bring up, and, kind of symbolism and hearing different ideas and talking about, people's talents and gifts. So yeah, if anyone ever wants to talk to me about that, I am more than willing. And so with a project this big, I think it's, the more people that can get excited about it and be involved and want to help, I think is where you see stuff like this start to shine. Because again, going more custom with your build and kind of looking for opportunities to express, uh, Orthodox tradition through your building. That's going to take a lot of good input from a lot of different areas. And so I think, as we're kind of like laying all this out, you definitely need to kind of get out on the right foot. I think starting with kind of an architect and an engineer to kind of work through a lot of the plans, make sure, design it in a way that's structurally sound, that meets kind of code and all these kinds of things. It can be kind of tricky to get the codes approved. There have been other people that have successfully done it, but it takes kind of the extra step of working with your local zoning committees, all those kinds of things to really, you almost have to teach them what this is, because most people haven't heard of any of these building materials or methods before. And so to them, it's unproven, it's unsafe. But, once you kind of rely on the multitude of, examples throughout history and even currently that people are doing, I think it's a pretty compelling argument that this works, that it's been done. And so I think if you can spend the time and kind of explain and put in the work to kind of bring up these examples and show people how it can be done, then I think people are ultimately willing to kind of get on board and green light these things. So it's not impossible by any means. And I think let's go into that. But yeah, so then as the design kind of goes through, I think it should be, definitely built with the glory of God in mind. It's something where if you're really building a space from scratch, you kind of have the opportunity to really, kind of put God's way front and foremost into every aspect of it. And so, that transcends just the architecture of it. It goes down to how you're designing it, the process of collaboration and coming up with good ideas with people, and, good communication. And then, the aspects of community building and really being, present with other people and volunteering together to, contribute and all these things. So at each stage, it's not just the building. It's not just the final result. It's the different process. It's the different stages, and where people can really, I think, glorify God in the entire process that matters with this. So, um, yeah. So I think that's going to wrap it up. Again, anyone that wants to throw some ideas my way, give me some constructive criticism. I'd love to hear ways it could be improved, maybe areas things I'm missing. I've had a lot more thoughts about it, so even more on the practical side. So if you'd like to hear some of those things, I'm happy to share further as well. But I appreciate everyone for their attention, and God bless you.